Welcome in, everybody. I've got Gustavs here with me today. Why didn't my stupid thing fire up here? Give me 1 second. I just want to double check. Ah, there we go. All right. Yeah, it's definitely live. Sometimes YouTube does not work, and you always have to check. So I checked. All right. This is going to be a fun conversation. Let me set up for you what happened. So we were doing our movie club, which we do, like, I guess once a month is what we're aiming for. And we were watching Seven Samurai, and you should watch that live stream if you haven't seen it. It's awesome. We had a lot of fun. And of course, people should join in if they're so inclined, and if they're not inclined, then they should join in anyway because it's awesome. And one of the observations that Gustavs made, which really reframed a bunch of things for me, was that in that movie, a lot of what's happening is what he referred to as the mediation of the margin. And I understand that the thumbnail and the title is a bit of a troll, and it is, but it is to the point. And the point is the way people are talking about the margin, I think, is wrong. Peugeot will talk about the margin as though it is a binary, and that the margin is being put in the center or something. And of course, you'd have to describe then, well, how does that happen? Like, who's doing the pudding? Right. And I don't think that's correct at all. I think what you have is a flood of the margin, and that's a third condition, right? So if you're stuck in a binary, one condition you might imagine is that the center is a very small number of people because the elite, and then the margin is a very small number of people because the margin, and then they're swapping positions, right? That's that flip that Jonathan talks about. And I don't like to contradict a fellow French Canadian because obviously one of God's chosen people, but no, what we're seeing is this other condition, and this other condition is more akin to what Peterson talks about with chaos versus order, right? And the part that we do this this little new practice on the Market Wisdom Discord server, where we talk about maps of meaning, and so we're going through the 2017's maps of meaning right now. We're about halfway done, and Peterson is very much talking about chaos and order, but he won't talk about what proper order is, what's right order, what's wrong order, how do you tell them apart, right? How do you know when things are corrupt, things like that, which I try to talk about here on navigating patterns, obviously. So I think the overall problem is that people who are or were allegedly Protestants have not unprotestantized, and they don't want to do the judgment. And so they outsource that judgment to God. They just, it's not Jesus take the wheel. It's way worse. It may lead to Jesus take the wheel because I can't make my own decisions, and fair enough, maybe sometimes you can't, but it's worse because you're not judging anything around you either. And when you don't judge things around you, you don't take action. And then you end up with mothers murdering their children left, right, and center because some retard thought it was an acceptable idea to put a mother-child murder case on the TV, which I cannot. The depths to which it's obvious that that was a stupid idea just remind me that people are dumber than I ever could imagine, and there's more of them than I ever can imagine. So we want to sort of, well, at least I want to. Gustavs can take this in any direction he wants, but I wanted to sort of point out that no, the proper way to deal with this margin issue is it's a flood, not a switch, right? The margin's incompetent. It can't take over the center. It's ridiculous, right? If it tried, it would only be chaos. And you could always argue that's part of what's happening. I don't agree. I think it's more like a flood. And I want to differentiate that because I think that's important. And then how do you deal with this? Like, okay, Peterson, there's chaos and order. What does good order look like, and what does bad order look like, right? What does good relationship between the margin and the center look like, and what is bad? And Gustavs, I know we were talking before this, and you wanted to sort of differentiate maybe quickly how Peugeot talks about the center and the margin in terms of concentric circles, and how you think your brilliant insight, by the way, from the movie club, that Seven Samurai really exemplifies how that is different from what it sounds like Peugeot's describing.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good, good to be here. I think it'll be interesting. These are really tough things to talk about, and I think the main thing I don't really see in Peugeot's talking. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have this like in his mind. Peugeot, uh, Jonathan Peugeot, very often really simplifies things and dumbs things down for his audience. He does this a lot. There's many sophisticated things that he has sometimes kind of hinted towards and hasn't expressed and so on. Like that has happened. But I would say that actually the first thing that you said, Mark, that I do not see Jonathan Peugeot saying is that the hierarchy is like many concentric circles. Actually, he tends to only have a is a sort of conception of the mountain as like degrees or degrees, but not degrees in kinds, degrees of like continuous kind of degrees, right? There's even though he does have an idea of like the center and the margin, and that's a lot of what he's talked about, and it's been great for me as well. But he tends not to actually insert um actual boundaries, actual boundaries, like separation between things very much. And whenever there is separation, he actually tends to point out the kind of fascist elements of it or something like that.
Right.
Um, that happens a lot. So yeah, so I would say first of all, there's not much like gradation in between the levels of the center and the boundary, first of all. And there's also no real like actual enforcement of a boundary at any point, which I think is super important. And there's a lot of evidence and there's a lot of tradition behind the importance of actually separating things, of keeping things that should be separate actually separate. And yeah, Peugeot has talked about this sometimes. Like the really great video he did on the like why there's all these ritual traditions for the Jews, and like um in the 5 books of Moses, yeah, the Pentateuch, of keeping animal products and plant products separate, for example. Like that's a big separation that's like really important. Um, and stuff like that. So there need to be separations within the hierarchy, and that's kind of one of the things that I really want to talk about today.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, I'm always will say highly suspicious of certain things. And one of the things I'm highly suspicious of is the fact that all these guys really like Verviki's work. And Verviki is really reliant on Csikszentmihalyi's concept of the flow state.
Hmm.
And flow is a blending of things through unity, right? So when you have a flow of something, it unifies, and it unifies things that flow in and around it, right? So that metaphor explains a lot of stuff, but it ignores the boundary. And one of the problems, I've said this before, with Vervaeke's flow state is, yeah, flow state's also how you fall off the mountain while you're rock climbing. It's not just the thrill you get while rock climbing. Like flow state kills a lot of people, man. It's not an untrammeled good, and I think that Dr. Vervaeke uses it that way. That's what I have sensed in his work, anyway. And I think that's why the other former Protestants, who are still actually Protestant, by the way, all other ways. I think that's exactly why they like the work, right? Because they like this idea of the one and the many, and it's like, yeah, but the one and the many is completely wrong, and it's just, like there's still three things, right? There's many, there's a unity, and there's a whole. The difference between the whole and the unity is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Whoops, right? That's where it all breaks down. I mean, you can emergence is good your way to anything, but you're not going to emergence your good. Emergence is good your way to the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's a break. And the problem is, yeah, they all talk about hierarchy and nobody bothers to define it. And the defining factors of hierarchy are things like a scale, which changes the math. In math, scale changes math. Um, Momentum, right, as a function, you could, yeah, you could describe the change in momentum as a function of the change in math, right? The law of large numbers, bang, right? But it also has other things, like as you go up, the rules just don't just change, right? New rules are available, right? And so in the same way that we talk about the farmers have a certain worldview. In the Seven Samurai movie, which is a brilliant movie, we should watch it and then watch our well, actually fill out the document and then watch our live stream, because it's a good practice. It really is. They go to the city, they don't know how to behave in this, like they run into all these little problems in the city, right? And that's fine, right? The samurai have no problems adapting the village to war, right? But the farmers knew this. Like, we don't know how to fight. We can't fight. Like, we can't do that. Like, maybe, and maybe in our desperation we should try or whatever. But like, they understood, and look, man, it's a Japanese film. The Easterners really have hierarchy nailed down in a way that we do not appreciate at all in the West. Sorry, we're just stupid when it comes. All of us collectively retarded when it comes to that. They understand hierarchy at a level that we haven't even defined yet, much less discussed. And so they know that, yeah, we could fight it out, but that would be the same as dying. And yeah, this is part of the discussion at the beginning of the movie. Well, we're dying anyway. What difference does it make? We might as well go out fighting, right? And then it's decided, no, we're going to go seek help. Even though seeking help is hopeless too, right? But you have to consider, and we do go into this, in more detail in that particular stream, in the movie club stream on Seven Samurai. This is after basically the king was beheaded for all intents and purposes in feudal Japan. So there's already been a collapse, right? And so this movie very much struggles with that collapse and how it manifests, and whether or not this sort of emergence is good framework can be seen, we'll say, from a Western perspective in the East. And then that just, when Westerners watch it, they just miss a bunch of stuff because we're retarded. We don't think the way the Easterners think at all. But there's enough there certainly for us. So the real problem is you have to define the boundaries of the hierarchy and when they've been crossed and when they haven't. If for no other reason, we'll leave the, what has dominion over you and what submission and all that nonsense, which, we can certainly get into, but we don't need to discuss that, to discuss the more important issue. When has there been a transgression and how serious was it? Because a transgression of hierarchy is by definition always more serious than a transgression across the hierarchy, right? So something on the vertical plane is always more serious because, again, it's points of scale, and scale matters, right? Is always more serious than a horizontal, right? Like if I insult you and we're both peasants, maybe we get into a fight, we resolve it that way, right? If you insult the king has to behead you basically, because you can't do that. Like, that's not your role,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so there is a difference, and it's an important difference, and it has to be understood and dealt with. And it can't be, well, I'm not going to judge because everyone's going to get judged at the end of time anyway, and therefore nothing. We're going to change nothing and watch the world burn, because that seems to be where we're at.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Where do you want to go from there, Gustavs?
I wanted to give, just some explanation of like the value of hierarchy, or like just we can do a little bit of discussion about that, and then I wanted to go into the importance of having hierarchy, and then the importance of upholding it, like some ways it can be done, or some ways it can be failed. So a very big value in hierarchy is one of the things that you've talked about a lot, Mark, which is that that we need different people in society, and that most people can only do one thing well. So you can't do everything, right? So in terms of the samurai, you can have people who are good at farming, or who are adapted and formed for it, and you can have people who are good at fighting and adapted and formed for it, but you generally don't have people that can do both, actually.
Right.
And that if you're trying to do the other job even slightly, then you're probably neglecting your own duty, whatever it is. Like if you're trying to learn how to do kung fu stuff while you're supposed to be farming, like, okay, a little bit might be good for you in some interesting way, but generally not. And actually, if you keep doing kung fu too much, then not only are you neglecting being a farmer, but you might accidentally get called into a proper war where everybody is expected to be like a super high level black belt, and then you're a nuisance to your own army, to your own compatriots, and you just die.
Right. Right. And there's two issues. See, and this is where the scaling matters, right? There's two issues. So sure, there's exceptions. There's people that are prodigies or whatever, and they're good at multiple things and whatever. Like I understand that. But they're exceptions. Don't focus on exceptions because you're not gonna run into them. Like that's just not gonna happen to you because they're exceptions, right? But B, there's two constraints. One is the constraint of time, right? And this actually comes up in Seven Samurai because there's one point where they're basically like, yeah, all this guy does is samurai stuff all the time, and he's the best among us at samurai stuff. He's also not doing the planning, by the way. He does zero of the strategy. All he does is say, hey, I know a neat trick. I can do this and help us out. It's like, oh, yeah, go do that. Right. And then he does it. Everyone's amazed. Like, how did you get away with that? Right. And so there's that aspect. The other aspect is the limitation of time. So, as an entrepreneur who started several businesses now and been involved in several others that I didn't necessarily start, uh, there's a lot of things I can do. Like I can actually do basic accounting much better than your average bear in some cases, as well as a low level accountant. Unfortunately, I can't do that and code at the same time. And in business, it ends up that you need something like 8 out of 12 skills to run a business, on your own, basically, although that's changing a little bit with technology and AI and all that nonsense. But at the end of the day, you can't do 8 things all at once. Like you can't. No one can. Like I've never seen anybody do it. Right? Usually you hire out. Right? It takes money to make money. That's why. You hire an accountant, you hire a programmer, you hire a manager and you do the programming. You hire a sales and marketing guy, whatever it is, right? You pay the cloud people to cloud so you don't have to build your own stupid infrastructure, whatever it is, right? And that's actually important. And so because you can't, even if you have the skills to do everything, which almost certainly you don't, to be fair, you'd be really lucky to have the skills to do one thing well. Quite honestly, you should just count yourself lucky, be humble, be happy, right? And don't count on it. Like assume you're an idiot because it's much more likely. It's much more likely that the only person impressed with your skill set, the thing you're good at, is you, and everyone else kind of thinks like, I guess you're all right. We'll keep you around. And even if you're good at more than one thing, there's a time component that constrains you. So you're constrained by the top level skill you can have, and you're constrained by the amount of time you can have irrespective of that skill level. And
Yep.
just I don't know what to tell you. Like the world is full of constraints. That's the one thing you need to understand and get a handle on. And that's why you need hierarchy. Because the world is full of constraints.
Yeah.
I don't
absolutely.
have time. Gustavs, I know. Well, no, I'm gonna sense with my super spidey powers that there are people out there that pay attention to the electrical energy markets, for example. And poor Mark here, who has had meetings with politicians, state level politicians, about energy, knows nothing about that. I know other things. I know a lot about data centers and computers and something about electricity, but I don't know about these crazy electrical markets and how all that works. And you do better talking to me about stock trading. That I can have something to say about. But the energy markets, I'm sure somewhere out there, though, there might be someone who really knows that market well. What do you think, Gustavs?
Yeah, I think there's someone out there, and yeah, he should be the best at that as he can, for the good of everyone.
Exactly.
So that everyone can just give that job to me, and we'll all be happy. Yeah, and then there's like different people need different purposes, and there's a real hierarchy of purposes. It's not like it's not artificial. It's not socially invented to justify some kind of inequality or something like that. Like there's a very real hierarchy of purposes. Like Peugeot uses the example of the chair all the time. There's just things like that. There's scales of these things, and yeah, it just so happens that it works really well when you have people who are in charge of other people. Then everyone can get their job, and some of those jobs can be more management and like at helping give the lower purposes to other people, and they themselves will receive purposes from other people who are doing even higher level stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone has a boss,
that's
pretty
right.
much.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and everyone's moved by their purpose or their telos, if you want to put it that way,
Yep.
their final cause. Which sort of always on this channel, the big deal is that we always want to make final cause great again. And a good example of this is just imagine, if you would, how much better everything would be if Candace Owens weren't talking about Charlie Kirk, but
Yep.
instead had something else to occupy her time with, other than something that she's inevitably just going to be wrong about and make the entire situation worse for everybody over.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't know
Yep.
how you're gonna get around that particular example, right? But I mean, I know the crazy people will. But it's the same with, well, what should you be watching? Should be watching a murder trial in Massachusetts, which is Massachusetts is a disaster, man. I left for a reason. Like, I saw what was happening. It wasn't that. This shouldn't be like all that. Like, oh my goodness, we're all shocked. Like, what? How did you not see that coming? And fair enough, you didn't, and I did. I have special skills though, and you don't, and fair enough. Like, that's fine. Also, warned a bunch of people, so
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
still up there. It's your inability to recognize different people are different, and inequality happened to you at birth. And the solution to inequality, which I have a video on, by the way, is hierarchy. Hierarchy solves inequality. Do you know what else solves inequality, Gustavs? You want to guess at all the other things that solve inequality? Yes, nothing. Nothing else solves inequality, actually. Zero things. There are zero things that aren't hierarchy that resolve inequality. Sorry. I hate to, like, why do I have to say these things? This is so obvious, but also, I understand we're in a time and a place. It's a tough time and a place for Mark. I'll tell you that much. I'm getting kind of tired of this. But I'm glad you're here. Let's dig in to this idea that you had, because this was a complete mind blow for me. I completely took me right out of my frame and like made a bunch of things make more sense to me, particularly around how Jonathan talks about the world. And yeah, look, I mean, I've been to some of Jonathan's sort of unrecorded, sort of private public events, if you will. And yeah, he speaks a little bit differently there about things. There's a little more nuance when he's sitting in an Orthodox church trying to explain something deep to you, and making sure 3 separate times that it's not being recorded, which is really weird. It's very surreal. Also a lot of fun. And so there's definitely some nuance there, but I've always struggled with his powers and principalities and his center margin thing. And so let's talk about this idea of mediation, because I thought that was like a much better way to think about it than the way I had been struggling with for ages now.
Right. So the mediation, I mean, if you are in a, let's say we all start out in an equal state, like we're all equal. We live in an equal society. But yeah, like we're all cavemen. We each have our own cave in our own forest, and we never meet. But somehow, for some reason, we just can't do that much with the world. We want to hunt down a mammoth that we cannot do by ourselves. For that to happen, there needs to be some kind of inequality has to arise, actually, because otherwise the purpose doesn't work like that. Like that there needs to be a leader, and that leader has to rise above the flock somehow. And when that happens, the leader not only becomes high himself, but he also separates himself from the rest of the people. Like in having hierarchy, you not only create a different state of being, like you become a chieftain or a prince or something, or a priest, but you also create a boundary between yourself and other people. Like you need to have both. If you don't have both, then it's going to be chaos. Then people won't actually know what's going on, like who's the leader. Did I forget who the leader is? What makes me different from other people, or what makes a leader different from other people? So you really need to have both aspects. You not only need to have some quality that you kind of have, but you also need to have an external separation with from the world in order for that quality to actually exist and to be recognized in that way.
Yeah, I wanna highlight quickly our excellent friend Manuel. Manuel, it's so nice to see you today. Come back when we're done. Why did you have to show up just before our live stream? Manifesting in the world sets you apart. Exactly. Exactly. Right. Any action in the world is gonna immediately differentiate you from the rest of the world. And there will be a discernment that has to be made, right? That you're doing whether you realize it or not. And so the people who seem to want to outsource all the judgment to God or whatever are fooling themselves and being ridiculous.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry,
So
continue.
yeah, no, yeah, great point, Manuel. So you can see it as you're both manifesting the quality of being special, but you're also upholding the distinction. And those are like kind of different things. There's like
Yes.
um it's like not only are you just performing, the job of being a prince, but you're also putting a lot of work into making sure that you don't meet with other people, because
Yeah.
that's just because you need to put work into seclusion, and both of those aspects are important and part of maintaining the whole thing. And that's what was happening in the Seven Samurai movie, is that they were making decisions and acting, at great sacrifice to maintain that distinction, actually. Right.
Right.
So they were actually spreading out, and they were flattening the qualitative hierarchy of being a warrior. They
Mhm.
were making everybody a warrior, but they still upheld the social distinction, the separation,
Yes.
not in quality necessarily, but in, I don't know, like ontology or something. I don't know, something like that. Like, don't
Yeah, yeah.
don't don't shoot me for using that word, but they were maintaining the distinction even though the quality was getting spread out. Right.
That's right.
That's kind of what I was pointing towards, I think.
Yeah, so there's a couple of instances of that in the movie. I didn't I didn't wanna do this, but also was real convenient. It is an exceptionally long movie, although it's worth every minute of your time. Um, it's also worthy to note that there's not a lot of dialogue in that film, and it's
Mm.
glorious for I love nonverbal communication in films. It's phenomenal. Non-visual, it's black and white. It's fantastic. They go through that in a number of ways, and I think, now that you split it up that way, that's what we're missing. We're missing the willingness and the drive and the tools in many cases to maintain the distinction. Because you can be president if you want. It's like, no, you probably can't, right? Oh, you could be a writer if you want. No, you probably, and we've dropped the barrier to entry on everything. And so I saw that's in the entrepreneur space. Like, I've been starting businesses since I was a wee young lad, and they all failed except the one that was just me, which is weird. Tell me you don't get along with people without telling me you don't get along with people. Right. You know, and now everybody's trying to be an entrepreneur. Most of the people are terrible at it. There's all these support structures in place. There's all these grant money, and there's all kinds of investment money everywhere. Um, and it's a mess because most of these people have bad ideas, or they're just not the guy that can implement the good idea. Because a lot of people have good ideas, but they're just out of their depth, right? I've got this whole Tesla turbine project I want to do, and I just don't have the equipment, and I don't have the money to buy the equipment. But I'd be working on that right now. I could, believe me. I try to do everything else at the same time because that's just my nature. But yeah,
Yep.
I'd be doing it. But I don't have the equipment. I just don't have the equipment. I have to hire people to do specialized machine work and all. I can't do it. So I don't put too much time into it. Every once in a while, I'll dip my toe back in. But when you flood something like entrepreneurship, everyone's trying to be an entrepreneur. They're grabbing all the people from the schools and just trying to, like, no, you need to start your own business, and it's the creator economy, and it's this economy and that
Yep.
economy, and we're all going to side hustle our way to millions of dollars. It's like, why are you doing this, right? And not that that's a bad thing, and I'm very involved in those circles, and helping out here in Columbia, South Carolina with that stuff. But also I see it kind of nationwide, and that
Hmm.
flood is no good. But there is a way to flatten it. So in the Seven Samurai, one of the ways they flatten the distinction is um, all the warriors are treated the same, even though they all have different qualities and skills, and that's
Mm.
made very clear in the beginning of the movie. Like that's the beginning of the movie is so brilliant because it's all
Yep.
set and setting, and it's very well done. And they also do it when they take, what would be a normal farmer's harvest, and it's kind of quick. You got to kind of know and listen closely. But normal farmer's harvest, each family would harvest their own field that they've been cultivating because they're families, and you should cultivate your own field, right? You get your own results. That's fine. As a family, that's fine. As a single person, maybe that is a terrible idea, but as a family, it works great. That was certainly feudal Japan. Like, it worked for at least 1,000 years that I know of, probably longer. Good for them. Seems like the right answer, by the way. Maybe we should go back. And then they come in and they say, no, no, no. This one harvest, we're all going to harvest as squads as part of basically a battle formation, right? As a war formation. And they do it. And they only do it the once. Like they only do it on the final barley harvest. And it's like, oh, you're really kind of taking that squadron attitude and training it into them using the thing that they know the best, which is a mixing and a flattening of the individual quality. And so, yeah, there is a flattening of quality there to kind of get this done. And I do wonder how much, especially that movie's so freaking influential. There's so many derivatives and derivatives of derivatives, copies of copies. In other words, not good. Of that movie, I wonder how much of an impact it really had on us, right? Because there's a question there. I wanted to jump real quick, Manuel. The relationship to what makes you who you are, holding as primary is caring for your soul. Yeah, if you hold that as primary, yeah, sure. And then when you attend to that, you are able to appreciate your place in hierarchy. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it requires more. Like we have to not say, oh, I also have postpartum depression. Like, no, we don't want to drag people down to the lowest common denominator to make them equal, because that's what happens, right? People get dragged down to the lowest common denominator because that's the only way to do equality, is to make things worse and worse
Mm.
and worse until you've included the lowest possible person. Now, that would be an expansion of the margin. That would not be making the margin the center. And I see an expansion of the margin. I see more blue-haired people. Did you know blue hair causes obesity? And I see more people with piercings and tattoos, and I see more people that won't dress properly ever, right? I see more of that. Okay. I know what proper healthy margin looks like. I'm old enough. Back when I was a boy, like I saw all this stuff, more correctly situated than it is now, particularly in public. And we can blame part of that on the internet. I could shut off the internet tomorrow. I'll do it. If there's a way to do it, lead me to the switch. I'm all in, even though I'm a big
Yep.
fan and all that. I don't care. Way too much harm to the world. Way too much. And
Yep.
it is a flattening, and it is a flattening of quality that's unhealthy and not temporary, like it was in the Seven Samurai. So that's a really good
Yep.
point about the flattening of quality. I like the way you put that. And that flattening of quality only, it's not some sophisticated like Heideggerian or Nietzschean or Jungian sort of framework here, right? A flood will do that. Like, it doesn't take complicated tools and crazy philosophical jargon. You flood things, you're also going to get these other, it's like a bonus, right? It's like Tim Pool used to say, hopefully he still says it, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Yeah, you flood people with equality because you won't maintain the distinction. You'll say, oh, you can be president just like Donald Trump or whatever. No, you can't. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculous.
It's like we're going to make it mandated for everybody to know how to read, for example.
Yeah.
And then
That's
you
what
end up
it
with
is.
everybody being able to read, but like, does it really? I mean, are people? First of all, are people reading things that are worth reading? Are people
Yeah.
able to comprehend things that that even though
Right.
they're reading the letters or whatever? Like, no,
Yeah.
just no.
And then you get them trying to use what they think they read as a gotcha. And I went through that
Yep.
on Twitter earlier today. Some
Yep.
reply stuff. And I caveated it up front. I don't think you have the cognitive capability to understand what I'm telling you right now about how optics works on a video screen, like on an LCD screen. And of course, he proved me right. Why, I don't know. Like, why you want to prove me right when I call you an idiot? I don't know, but I can't stop you, I guess. And it is. I mean, I have a video on the flood of literacy. Flood of literacy is bad because cost is comprehension. And like all floods, right? Like, oh, we're going to show you to read, but now people are going to somehow, some way think that the allegory of Plato's cave has something to do with individualism and that that's a good thing. And it's just like, well, I don't know what Republic you read, but the one by Plato says quite the opposite, my friend. If you want to understand hierarchy, actually book 7's not a bad place to start. And if you want to understand why democracy is evil, just keep going through book 8 and it'll explain all that to you. But somehow all these people, and this is important, this is where people miss it. These are the same physical, actual persons, right? They'll say, read more classics, read old books, read and at the same time, they don't understand Plato at all. They understand nothing about the Republic. They'll call for more democracy all day long. They'll espouse individualism and emergence is good all day long. And I'm like, obviously reading old books and learning the classics didn't work for you because you're an idiot and you're saying things that are contradicted by the texts that you claim are valuable. How much did you value them? Or maybe you're just stupid and you can't read, right? Maybe your reading comprehension is that low. I don't know. I don't particularly care because I'm a pragmatist. You're a lunatic. I'm not listening to you. Obviously, read old books is a bad solution. It hasn't worked so far. I don't know why you think it's going to work now. Like, no.
Yep. And just like my point is that that the distinctions in the hierarchy that like the hierarchy is dependent on the boundary between the layers. I think I read somewhere, someone told me that this is like the Aristotelian way of thinking about things, that like there's that the edge case or the terminus of something is like the definition of it. Okay, that might be the case. I haven't read enough books to know that, but it makes sense to me. Like the hierarchy depends on the boundary between the layers, and then it's not just that the boundary between the layers arises as a consequence of having some innate distinctions between things, and then you set up a boundary around it. I mean, that I guess that can also happen sometimes. Like, I don't think that's an invalid way of looking at it. I think that would be the Platonic way of thinking about it. But that we need to uphold these boundaries, and that most, if not all, boundaries in between levels of hierarchy, or actually in between things in general, like distinctions have been upheld and created by people, and that's been like a good thing. Right. So we need distinctions, and generally all social hierarchies have, well, not all necessarily, but many ones. Like one of the big ones that we think about have generally come about from one tribe coming in and dominating the others, pretty much. You get this with like the Normans and the Britons. You get this with, the Aztec Empire is this how it works. But as like I forget who it was. Maybe it was the Aztec tribe or the Mexico tribe. I don't remember, but they were one tribe that came in and messed up all the others and became the central warlords. There were other tribes, but it was like one tribe above the rest.
They were brutal. Yeah. And that happened in further north, in what is now the United States. Yeah. Right. Certain tribes would just freaking slaughter.
So like the distinction between these, the different layers of society kind of did arise as just distinctions between, let's say, tribes on the same level that at one point, like, just didn't work that way anymore. There was a hierarchy and there was a separation and a distinction. And maybe it's a distinction of language or a distinction of like culture, of in extreme cases like skin color or things like that,
or value set. Like if you're willing to slaughter your enemy and the other people aren't, you win the war every time. Like history's pretty clear about this, right? But but I want to sort of like maybe it seems like a small detour, but I want to sort of explain why boundaries seem to be off the table for everybody. I think the reason why boundaries are off the table for quote everybody is really just certain people, and those certain people I'm just going to label them flat out right now, irrespective of all other variables. Fundamentalists. Okay, and one of the hallmarks of fundamentalist thinking is that they're very stuck with literal interpretations of things. And so they take things from a text. Now, it doesn't have to be, we'll say, a written word text, unfortunately. It can just be a dogmatic statement. And, fundamentalists basically, they say, well, we don't believe in dogma. We just, follow whatever book they follow, right? There's a battle of the two books. I have a video on that, right? Where some people are following the origin of species as their sort of originating uh, canonical text, and other people are following this. What's that book? Oh, the Bible, right? It doesn't have an author. How can I remember these things? And so that explains a lot. Like, oh, okay, well, you're trying to be legalistic about the Bible. Well, there are legalistic sections of the Bible, but you can't do that with the whole Bible. A lot of it's allegorical and metaphorical, and right. So you can't apply fundamentalism to it, even though that's sola scriptura. It's fundamentally Protestant. All Protestants are fundamentally fundamentalists because what else can they do, right? At some point, they have to have their quote confessions, which are not confessions by any reasonable standard. They're just statements of belief, which don't convey faith. But you end up with this. I mean, the tech bros have the same problem, right? They have this set of fundamental beliefs that they take quote literally as some kind of law. And when you apply that to boundaries, and you say, well, no, there shouldn't be boundaries because the king can't always be the king. What if the king gets corrupt? We need a way right? But boundaries are permeable in all cases in nature, like everywhere we can find, right? Even in physics, and I forget where I heard this, is a million years ago. You can send a signal through a solid block of lead using a particle beam. Because just enough of that beam gets through to make an audible sound. I mean, it's crackly and noisy and terrible, but it actually works. Like so even solid steel is permeable, right? And so when people say boundaries or think about boundaries, they think about something that's definitely keeping everyone and everything separated. And that's not what a boundary is. And like I said in the beginning, one way to understand boundaries is that the rules change, right? The rules change. So, I went to a Catholic junior high in my first year of high school, prep school, and two different schools. But both of them, like, you use a suit, coat, and tie. Like, you can go to school any other way, right? And like that was just a requirement, and it did in many ways, although not in the most important ways, I think, but at least I thought that at the time, in many ways elevate not only the discourse of the students, but their behavior, right? It prevented certain behavior. First of all, it's really hard to run in those stupid freaking dress shoes, which piss me off and hurt my feet. That's not a trivial thing, though. That's actually really important because you're learning by pain, not to, just run off. Because I was prone to, they would have diagnosed me with ADHD if they had the chance. I was too quick for them. Didn't stand still long enough. So, but it was good training. Like, oh, I'm constrained by my tie. I have to kind of pay attention to like my breathing and stuff. It's not free and open like it should be, right? I mean, all these things actually matter. They're not little things when they're added up, especially not when you're formed by them, when you're in junior high and your first year of high school and stuff, right? And that actually matters. Now, it's not bad that I then went to Lowell High and the rules were different. Obviously, it's a big school, right? I was from little schools, and then I go to this huge, enormous 1,000 students, right? Just craziness.
Mhm.
It's not a big deal. I mean, there was still a dress code. There were still dress codes. They just weren't suit, coat, and tie and dress shoes, right? So, it was much better. It was a vast improvement on some order, but it's not like there was no permeability. There was always permeability. And I think that's the problem. When you say boundaries, people go, "Oh no, an impenetrable wall of evil," and it's like, no, you need boundaries, guy. Because if you, I think one of the problems is, and this happens to people all the time, especially on YouTube. If you're watching, some of the YouTube personalities sell out their channels and leave and do other things, and they just hit the wall because they get swept up in the scale. Like, oh, my
Yep.
YouTube channel got so big, it needed full-time management, whereas before it was a part-time fun hobby. It's like, yeah, well, you hit this point of scale and you got swept up in it because that's what happens. But if you had
Yep.
understood the boundary and what it would require, that would have been totally different. I mean, even Mr. Beast talked about this on Diary of a CEO a little while ago. He basically said, yeah, we just hit a wall and we didn't want to hire somebody who like was from a big corporation and understood all of that, but like we had to because we couldn't figure it out on our own. We couldn't.
Yep.
We couldn't
Yep.
scale our thinking up. We had to bring somebody in who understood like how a 1,000-person company is run, right? And in entrepreneurship, it's actually kind of well stated. 50 people, right? You go past 50 people, all over, everything changes. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that never want to be anywhere near a company with more than 50 people in it because they don't like how impersonal it becomes. 50 people you can manage and know every person. After that, it gets really hard. You can appeal the Dunbar number or whatever you want. I don't particularly care.
Yep.
There's a there, and it's written about in books. It's well known, well understood. That doesn't mean it's well explained, right? But it's well described, and it's something that people can get a sense for and grasp onto. So I want to talk about this permeability, which leads us into this sort of, well, what do we do to mediate the margins, to mediate these borders? How do we not only draw those borders correctly? Maybe we can circle back around to that later. But what do we do when we have a border? How do we mediate that border? Who do we let in, and who do we keep out, and why? Because that I thought was a really useful frame.
Well, yeah. I mean, who do we let in? I mean, that's a question of like discernment, to be honest. And the answer by default should the default answer should be that you don't let someone in. Actually,
That's right. That's correct.
just like straight up, like you don't let anyone in. That's it. End of conversation. Okay, we can start a new conversation. Who are we gonna let? Like, are we gonna let you in? That's a different conversation. Like,
After something's happened,
convince me.
right?
Yeah.
After something's happened. So if you pay attention to stories correctly, and by that, let me be 100% clear. Don't listen to anybody in there talking about stories right now. They're all wrong. I know, really. I'm getting a little tired of those people. I'll tell you that right now. Pay attention to old stories. It's always deeds that get you through the hierarchy. It's always deeds. It's never conversation, right? And every once in a while, it's somebody above noticing deeds. Now, sometimes they notice single deeds that stand out. Sometimes they just notice a pattern of you just doing it, and doing it. And then there's a bunch of stories, and they're not, I'm not talking about necessarily main characters or protagonists or anything. I'm talking about pay attention to the freaking story. Like, comprehension really matters, right?
Yep.
What happens is, and this happens in Seven Samurai, people want to be in a certain place. They try to be in a certain place, and they can't.
Yep.
But people in charge know that, take them in anyway, and they get steered very silently into the place where they belong.
Yep.
And it just happens.
Well, yeah. That's if you're in a hierarchy, you are just like bound to be below somebody who is better than you, and you don't get to choose who that is, and you just have to assume that this person might have a lot of barley and no rice, so you're just gonna get the barley, and it's not up to you. Or you might have someone who has a lot of charity and not much justice, so you're just gonna get the charity and you're not gonna get the justice.
Yeah,
And that sort
exactly.
of thing. And that's you are where you are in the hierarchy, and you're going to depend, and that's going to depend, and the qualities of where you are and the environment that you're in is going to depend on the hierarchy. It's going to depend on the king of the levels above. Yeah, and like especially with the virtues, you see this a lot in society. Like the virtues of the king are going to be the ones that go down, and not everyone has all the virtues, and that's yeah, you're going to get what you're going to get.
We have all the
That's right.
virtues. We have
We
all the
yeah we have
virtues available on the shop, by the way.
yeah, and the virtue can't help but like flow down the hierarchy. And
Right.
when somebody turns you away from the city gate because you're not good enough, that teaches you a lot. It'll make you better, even if you wish you were inside. It's gonna make you better. It's gonna make everything better. It's gonna teach you to you yourself recognize what is important. Like, who should I be letting in? Who shouldn't I be letting in? And it's probably gonna be messy in your life, because since you're not at the top of the hierarchy, it's gonna look quite imperfect compared to whoever's at the top is. Like
Right.
people mimic the people above them in the hierarchy, and they do it worse. Like the mimicry
Yeah.
tends to be worse.
Yep. It's a copy of a copy. Yep.
Yeah, it's a copy of a copy, and that's that's why you need the distinctions, so that you can tell these things apart, and that people can maintain that better copy from the worst copy.
That's
And
right. That's right.
and yeah, like that's just the way it is.
Yeah. So that permeability of the boundary, I think that's really what the problem is, right? When people, I could point to any number of people, right? Very famous people, talk about no gatekeepers, right? They're just liberal equality believers, and well, the left me. Oh, so you're still a leftist, and leftism always leads to extremism. Is that what you're telling? Because that's what you told me. Whether you realize that's what you said or not is a different story, but you told me everything I needed to know. You're still a leftist, and leftism still leads to extremism because you refuse to do anything about your buddies in the left who left you. You let them leave. Why did you let them leave? Why didn't you prevent them from going nuts? Don't you have a responsibility to your fellow humans? Like, what the hell? Like, now it's worse for everybody, including you. It's just you were the last to notice. Good job. Like, these are not people to listen to about anything, really. Like, ultimately, don't listen to people like that about anything. They're lost. They're late to the party. They're totally lost. They don't see what they were part of. They don't take any responsibility for having been involved. And they act like, well, now that I've been left all alone, I'm all alone in the world and I can see clearly both sides. No, you can't.
Yeah.
Your side never changed. All you're lamenting is the loss of your friends who you let go nuts. That's not good. There's no mediation there, because there's a boundary on the lower end that has to be maintained too, right? Like, it's no good if you just like, well, there's them and they have everything, and this is more binary thinking, right? They have everything, and then there's the rest of us, and we're all in it together. And it's like, no, bro, I'm not with you, because I support them and you don't. So go away. Like, I'm
Right.
that puts me in a moderate position compared to you. Whether that's true objectively or not is a different question. But no, I'm not you. Go away. Get away from me. You are unprincipled. Like, without that.
But Mark, listen. So you just contrasted two situations. This other guy's situation is a binary, but you have 3 bits. You have
That's right.
the thing above, you yourself, and then this other person.
That's
and
right.
there's distinctions between all of you, all 3 of you. But if you see everything in a binary, you're always going to be resentful towards someone else who is above you, who is at the center, and relative to who you are marginal. And if you see the whole world this way, you're always either going to be resentful and envious of the person above, and you're going to be necessarily going to be, I don't know, proud and like haughty towards the person that's below. Whatever.
Yeah, you're gonna get stuck in the thing that our good friend Manuel Piss talks about all the time, which is this identification against. Okay?
Yes.
And what that technically means is not that you can identify 2 things. No, my friend. No, it's way worse. You can identify exactly one thing, and everything else is not the one thing. That is a very listen. Like, there isn't better language. You're stupid. Okay? Like, I'm sorry that you have this cognitive problem. Also, this is a major cognitive problem that prevents you from understanding almost anything in the world. right? Like, oh, we can always draw these distinctions. Well, no kidding. There's an infinite number of distinctions to be drawn because, as Dr. Peterson and Dr. Vervaeke have pointed out many, many times, any two things are infinitely different and infinitely the same. That this is not interesting, guys. This is not interesting. The fact that you can say the left left me, that you are unidentifying yourself, right? You're trying to identify against two other things. And that, of course, doesn't work because you haven't defined anything. Zero definitions, right? And that's part of the problem, Sally Joe. Those are the characters. Yes.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, when you don't draw a boundary on the other side, you never recognize, oh, these people who maybe became mask supporters or mask NPCs or mask zombies, whatever you want to call them, who we should have cared for but didn't because we're individualist leftist psychopaths. They slid past a boundary. You're not recognizing that because you didn't maintain the boundary below you because you don't want to gatekeep. Well, I've got news for you. If you're out there telling people about gatekeepers, you're trying to be the gatekeeper. You're trying to replace the gatekeepers with your statements, with your claims, with your authority. And that is inappropriate, sir or ma'am. Like, cut it out. You are in charge of nothing, and you should never, ever be put in charge of anything because you just don't understand the situation even a little bit. You're so far away from understanding how the world should work and how the world has to work that your opinion should be invalidated immediately. And I'm very sorry that it's not, because the internet. Also, did I mention I'd shut the internet off tomorrow or like immediately if I knew of a way? Because holy cats, what a disaster, you know?
Yep.
Global calamity of murdering children that have been born. Like we all warned you would happen, by the way. Just, not to be too I told you so. Oh, there's no such thing as too much I told you so in this case. Sorry. I'll stand by it. Yeah, this is what happens when you don't maintain a boundary beneath you either. Like there's a boundary. Who are the left? Who are the classical liberals? Who are these people? Please define your position, sir, so that I know where you are. Because otherwise I don't know where you are. I know you're identifying against extremism on both sides, like some kind of freaking hero or something. It's like, thanks, genius. I feel like I was born doing that. But I mean, if you want to make a big deal out of you figuring out that you had to do that this late in life, I guess you can out yourself as a little bit behind the times. I'm not impressed, though. Manuel, without a positive identity, you cannot track the world around you. Correct. As always, Manuel's the expert on identification against, guys. He really is. Relativism traps you into a necessity to understand yourself into relation to what's next to you. Oh, very insightful. That's 100% true.
Absolutely.
Sally Jo says yes. Okay.
Yes.
Well, there you go. If those aren't the two greatest authorities on this particular topic, then you're wrong about everything, because they definitely
can confirm. Yeah, I mean, so there's a different kind of boundary that I wanted to talk about, which has everything to do with this, and it's like traditionally it's been linked very, very, very closely. It's a bit more abstract. It's actually quite abstract, but it's another distinction that maps on, and it's corresponding to social hierarchy and everything. It is the separation of cause and effect. The separation of cause and effect has always been, like, the Greeks talked about it from the very beginning, cause and effect. But people don't know how to separate them anymore. They aren't separated, actually. They're getting mixed up.
Right. That's right.
And historically, it's the same thing. Philosophically, it follows this breakdown of social hierarchy perfectly. And, like, if you try to, and if you apply modern philosophy, you actually break down cause and effect. They do this, like the kind of the modern stuff, the French stuff, the German stuff, whatever. It breaks down cause and effect. Like this kind of thinking of, this is the cause of that, this is responsible for that, this is the consequence of this, doesn't follow anymore at all. And it's important to divide them in order to have, like, comprehensibility, in order to have in order to track things happening in the world, like when people say, why did this happen? I don't know, things just happen this way. Or I mean, when I hear this so much when people say, you can't know why this happened, it could have been because of this aspect, or it could have been because of that aspect. They cannot see the relationship between cause and effect.
Right.
Like this total skepticism about the world. People become skeptical. They're like, yeah, is this even the case? Is that even the case? Is doing this a good thing? I don't know. Like, so many people are stuck in this, and they no longer can separate and distinguish and recognize cause and effect, and they've kind of given up on it. And I have a lot of examples of this, but maybe you have some comments on that.
No, I mean, I think that's super important, is that we've squished time, we've reduced time to non-existent, right? It's everything's perennial and universal, which are different things.
Mm-hmm.
And they just never change. And so there's no hope for mediation, right? Like if a border is impermeable, then there's no reason to mediate it, and no mediation would be possible anyway, right? But borders are not impermeable. That's a wrong way to think about borders, right? Gates are things you walk through. They're not things that are closed all the time. I don't understand why we've taken the verbs out of everything. Everything is now a statement of material, unchanging material or something. It's very, very strange. And when you don't have the action and the change, the problem is the nihilism and the hopelessness comes, right? And Jordan Peterson talks about this, or has in the past, right? Basically, don't tell people you're all you could be, because that means you can't get any better, and you can get better. Of course, things could be better. Like, don't tell people the reason why you have to settle for the things the way you are is because you're as good as you're gonna get. That's a horrible message. Don't ever say that to anybody ever. Like, that's insane. You want to give them hope. Like, yeah, but you've come a long way, and you're not 2 years old anymore, pooping your diaper. Like, this is a big upgrade. Like, let's put this in some kind of context for you. And oh, by the way, you are a human being. You have the capacity to change, and you can have other people help you do that, right? The reason why people get hopeless is because they try to do it themselves, and then that almost always goes horrifically wrong. And some idiot out there is going to go, well, in this case, this saint, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to hunt them down. I'm going to punch them in the face. I'm going to say, no, that's not you though. So who cares that somebody else did something? Okay. I'm not Elon Musk. My father did not give me $750,000. I didn't have a brother to split it with, to learn about business when I was 15 or whatever. That didn't happen to me. Okay. So the odds that I was going to be Elon Musk, irrespective of how much more or less I know than Elon Musk, was always still actually zero, and never could have been any other thing, right? So it's a boundary. Like, no, I didn't grow up with these things that he grew up with. I grew up in a different environment, in a different situation. Different things happened to me, and so the cause and effects are different. And you're right, because of the skeptical cynicism, which, by the way, I have a video on. Of course, I do. We are skeptical of real relationships and cynical about real relationships, but ancient aliens, lizard people, the Illuminati, a big conspiracy, oh no, that's definitely what's happening. Like, we've just picked different cause and effect relationships that just happen to be dumb, right? So, and that's how you get Candace Owens. Like, no, absolutely. That's not how that works.
Absolutely. Like, when you lose track of the real stuff, then anything goes. Then really anything goes. And I mean, that's a pretty good, I would say, pretty good defense for like traditional social hierarchy, because then people knew what the cause was, like who's moving stuff. It used to be pretty clear. It didn't used to be some like lizard people or aliens or something. It was like you knew who your lord was, and he was responsible, not the other people. And however things go, like, you know where it's coming from. It's identified clearly. It's comprehensible. It's intelligible. It's not under cynical skepticism. Like, you might suspect it's the Lord's wife. That's about it. Like, maybe the Lord's wife is doing it, but still, it's comprehensible. And I mean, all this stuff, needs defending. Actually, like there's a participation there for me and you to have. You know,
Right.
when people doubt cause and effect, when people doubt who's in charge, like you can participate in defending the reality that is reality.
And you should. You should. You have to mediate it correct. It's all about mediation.
Yeah.
You have to mediate it correctly, right? So my obligation might be to call out evil, not necessarily to burn the witch, but
Yeah.
maybe to burn the witch too. Depends on the circumstances, right? And we need to know that, right? Because but I have an obligation to call it out, like period. And like if I don't do that, that's on me. But
Yep.
once I do that, that maybe alleviates my responsibility, at least in the short term, right? And if I call it out and I suffer for that for some reason, right? It causes me some struggle, or people go, you can't say that about that person, which by the way, they do all the freaking time. And so far, I've always been right when I've said that because I'm pretty careful, and they're not. They're just a bunch of bleeding heart psychopaths. Um, bad things happen when I do that, but
Yep.
it's still my obligation, right? It's a little weird. The best analogy I have is if I have an extra $1 million, I suppose I have 10 million, and I'm like determined to give 1 million away, and I go,
Mhm.
well, here, I'll give you $1 million, and you refuse it, I am out nothing. I still have my extra $1 million that I don't need, and you have nothing. But that's because of your rejection. It's not an equal situation where I lose the $1 million because you didn't take it or something. No, I still have the $1 million, right? If I offer people, oh, you can watch on my channel and learn how to make sense of the world, and they don't do that, I get all the points for having tried, and they get negative points for refusing engagement. I'm not too worried about this. I'm not
Yes.
worried that my channel doesn't have 5 million subscribers. That's fine by me. Like I'm either way, I'm still making out like a bandit. And oh, by the way, I have more time because if I had 5 million subscribers, I'd have to manage my channel. The scale would be different, and I'd lose a bunch of freedom actually. So I'm kind of
Yep.
okay with things the way they are. What do we got? What do we got? We've got Ixnon. Good to see you, sir. Without vertical causality, of course, people won't understand cause and effect. Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, the problem is there's two types of cause and effect. There's a horizontal cause and effect that people seem to understand pretty well. That's logic, reason, rationality. And then there's a vertical cause and effect, some of which, but not all of which, is covered by second order logic, right? By these second order effects, but not all of it, because you can't explain it all with logic.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a really good call out, actually. So I think people get confused. They're like, they're using this second order effects and explaining it using first order logic, and it doesn't work. That's a conspiracy, right? Because there's a bunch of things that are just going to happen no matter what. Like the minute the tech bros get into a measuring contest over who can have the largest valuation IPO in history, a bunch of other people get paranoid about whether or not they're up to something clever with AI. And it's like, no, they're really just in a stupid competition,
Mhm.
play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's really all that's happening there.
Mhm.
It's not, it's not difficult. Sally Joe, but why do you need to farm and hunt when you can just get your food from the grocery store like everybody else? Outrage and the how dare you voice. Yeah, well, I think that's part of the problem. I think I'm glad you brought it around to that, Sally, because I wanted to loop back on this. We are responsible for cultivation. We're responsible for cultivation of our spot in the hierarchy, right? We're responsible for the boundaries, both of the people below us and the people above us, and maintaining those boundaries, mediating them, right? And we are responsible for cultivating the people around us. And so, again, you're responsible for offering them the $1 million. You're not responsible if they refuse it, right? You're responsible for offering to feed a homeless person. You're not responsible once you've done that if they don't eat it. If you don't do that first action, though, you are responsible, right? That's a big deal. Like, no,
Yep.
you have to take the action. If the
Yeah.
action
Absolutely.
doesn't result in the thing, that's a different problem. But you have to take the action. You have to cultivate.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I really like Sally's comment. That's it's really good one, and it kind of I was listening to this audiobook about about the Spanish Empire recently. So that's where I got the Aztec stuff from. But this one event that happened was the Dutch revolt in the 17th century, and had to do with Calvinism. Basically, the Dutch Netherlands, they got inherited by the King of Spain, and as you might know, the Netherlands and Spain are not next to each other. They're actually separated by a bunch of different places, and they weren't that close together. And the Dutch, they were very wealthy at that time. They had tons of money, and some of them were becoming Calvinists, especially the ones at the top, towards the top of society, and they revolted against their king, and there was a lot of concern about this on a spiritual level, because they were removing the top of the hierarchy of society. And I mean, for the Calvinists, God is present everywhere. So them being cut off from the highest thing was not really a concern. They were removing the thing in the middle, but it's not really a concern because God is ever present. And it's kind of the same thing as what Sally is saying here with the grocery store being accessible for everyone, but like it's still being maintained somewhere, actually, by quite a lot of really amazing people that should not be taken for granted. And the king's response to this, to the Spanish king's response, was that he was responsible for all these souls in the Netherlands, even if they didn't love him or didn't want him. And he was so responsible that he started like a war that went on for 100 years and impoverished everyone, and just horrible. But he was concerned for his soul and for the soul of his subjects, and he definitely went for it. He definitely stood by that, and a lot of people stood by him as well in that thing. And the interesting thing is that in the Dutch Netherlands, they did become a very kind of equal society in a certain way. Like they were quite egalitarian, and they had a ton of money, and people thought that okay, like they might be in a certain sense like cut off from God, but they are sustained by cash, just insane cash coming in all the time. And the Netherlands is where actually cause and effect, in some sense, philosophically got mixed together, because Spinoza came up with this thing called monism, where a thing is not caused by like cause and effect did not get distinguished. They were kind of in the same thing. Like things are self-causing, effects are self-causing, right? So
That's
like
emergence is good right there.
Yeah, I mean, and it really maps on to what was happening, like politically, I guess you could say, politically, spiritually, and yeah, it's a case where okay, yeah, the king was far away and all this stuff, but he was still responsible. He was still trying to mediate, and he was definitely upholding the distinction between himself and his subjects. That was definitely happening there as well. Both of those things. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations where things are just kind of get torn apart by circumstances. There was a lot of other stuff going on at that time as well. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting. I mean, some people sort of talk about this, but they drop it pretty quickly. The big distinction in the United States, at the end of the day, is how you vote is based on where you live. It's not state by state. You live in the city, you live not in the city. That's it. That's the whole thing, right? And there's whole states. I mean, California is, we'll say, an overweighted example, but like the good citizens of the state of New York really want the southern part of New York to be its own place so that they can vote Republicans, because they're all Republicans. Right? It's just New York City that turns them Democrat. And if they could just get rid of that part, it would be great. So A, you never had democracy. B, you're not supposed to. And C, this is why, like, because it doesn't work. And quote, representative government is, I don't want my government to represent me, because my government will never know me. I want my government to represent virtues and values, preferably the Catholic ones. Thank you very much. That's what I want. I want a representative government. I want it representative of something higher than itself, not lower, because I'm lower than the government. I don't know if people figured this out, but actually, You, as a single person, are lower than the government, which is more than a single person.
Yep.
Why I would have to say this? I don't know, but I feel like it's necessary all of a sudden, right? And so, even in materialism, these principles hold just fine. The question is, why is everybody so confused about something so damn straightforward that it makes me puke that I have to even talk about it constantly? Because people
Yep.
don't, it's clear they're not understanding these very basic ways of thinking because the cause and effect is not there. And this is what
Yep.
I was saying early on years ago from the beginning about logic, because I've been down this road in the early 90s, guys. Already done all this, right? This is not my first rodeo here. A lot of people can't do logic and they'll never be able to. There's just a cognitive limit. They've hit it. Maybe they're binary thinkers. We kind of went over that earlier. Whatever, right? But the bottom line is you need boundaries. You need mediation to the boundaries. Those boundaries need to be permeable because otherwise it is tyranny. Sort of agreed.
Yep.
Impermeable boundaries is tyranny. Also, historically, tyranny is extraordinarily rare to the point where you probably actually know of all the instances of tyranny on any reasonable scale. That's how rare it is. You know what you
Yep.
don't know? Almost any other part of history, actually, right? You don't know any of those parts of history well. All the times when we had perfectly serviceable Roman emperors. Do you know how many Roman emperors there were? All the times they had perfectly okay pharaohs in Egypt. You know how many pharaohs there were in Egypt? Like, I could go on, but I hope you get how many kings of England nobody knows about because everything just kind of was okay. It wasn't great,
Yep.
right? But it wasn't terrible. So nobody
Yep.
knows these guys.
Yep. 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 Yeah. 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 Exactly. And I mean, we use these categories so easily. Like Egypt, Rome, Britain. For these categories to exist, these are comprehensible categories. I think we can agree. Like it's comprehensible. Like we say this word, we know what it is. The
Yeah,
comprehensibility, comes out of the fact that it was a one place ruled by one person.
that's right.
And
That's
and
right.
and it's not based on some essential whatever, just like quality inherited from the beginning of Genesis or something. Like these qualities came about from a crown which started with a guy, and that came from having a hierarchy. And if we want to have that kind of comprehensibility for the world, we're just going to need to have that hierarchy. And
Yeah,
that was, that's one of the things that like one of the concerns when people started getting rid of the kings and getting rid of the aristocracy and so on is just that you kind of lose comprehensibility about like who even are we? Because most people used to be, yeah, I'm the guy ruled by King Harold or something, and King Harold, and when you lose that, you no longer have that much in common with your neighbor.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I would say, does America have this comprehensibility? I don't comprehend America. America makes no sense to me. Like I won't even pretend.
It doesn't. It's completely different from anything else that's
It's
ever been.
completely different. Yeah,
But
completely
but
different.
but but before we move on, we have to address the Dutch grievances here. So our dear friend Manuel Post, the whole history was oppression by the patriarchy. They're suppressing the manifestation of my undefined utopia. He's outraged.
Yeah,
That's
it's
exactly the
outrageous.
problem. Yeah, no, I think that's super important, and I think that the reason why actually everyone, I'm dead serious, guys, and I've tried to talk to a bunch of people about this. So shame on them for not talking to me about this or somebody, because I've seen other people kind of bring up pieces of this. All the people talk, every single one of them does not understand the time frame here. They don't understand the momentum. Okay, the momentum is pretty clear. The time frame's 100% clear. It's actually differentiated by historians. There's this thing called pre-modern. I wonder if that's the beginning of modernism. I wonder when that is. Um, just look it up. You'll figure it out real quick what happened, right? It's not the printing press, by the way, either. So don't be thinking that. Don't be blaming technology. Don't become Heidegger. He was kind of retarded. So the bottom line is there's a momentum that happened as a result. So what's been happening is the top end is collapsing, like the top floor of a
Yep.
building pancaking onto the floor below it. So what happens is when you lose the authority at the top, So you have a guy, and maybe there's two guys, three guys vying for control over a state or something that should be a state. Um, and um, eventually there has to be a determination of who is or should instantiate the values, we'll say properly or correctly, right? And that's the conveyance of the crown by the authority of something higher, which is always the church, by the way, right? And so that conveyance, it's not like there's no emergence. It's just that emergence isn't the determining factor.
Yep.
And thank goodness, because if it was, tyranny would. This is why the academics are stuck, right? Because they keep making emergence as good arguments and saying emergence, emergence is emergence. And of course, emergence leads to tyranny more often, right? Because there's always a Hitler or a Stalin in the mix.
Absolutely.
Always.
Absolutely.
Right. And they're always willing to kill everybody else. And that always wins because, of course, it has to. Like, this is just basic math, right? Like, if you have 5 competitors and you kill all 5 of them, you still always win in all cases with no exceptions. There's exceptions to that rule. Right. And so that's not what you want, though, because although killing may sometimes be necessary in the contest for, holding the boundary or keeping the hierarchy pure or something, it's certainly not at all something that you want as the factor that gets the person to the top. You always want the crown to be conveyed as the result of, maybe there was some force, but it was justified, right? Maybe there was some murder, right? There was some kind of killing that was justified based on other factors. Like, well, if I didn't kill him, he was going to kill me, whatever, right? But you don't want it based on that alone. And that's part of the problem is that they can't make that differentiation. And so they constantly scramble between the two binary positions of, well, we don't want any tyrants, but emergence is good. But we don't want any tyrants, but emergence, and that's why they sound like fools, because they're fools and they don't understand what they're swimming in the water. They don't know that they're swimming in water, right? They see other people swimming in water and they go, well, I'm glad I'm not swimming in that water. It's like, but you are swimming in all water. It's just not that water, right? And they never make the leap. And for whatever reason, I think that's a cognitive limitation. It's at least a limitation of humility. Sally Jo, Mark, I'm okay with you having less freedom and more subscribers. So thanks, Sally. Sally doesn't care if I'm swamped and can't talk anymore to anybody. Manuel, emergence without pruning is flood. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And the so-called classical liberals, and I have what I think of as the only reasonable definition of classical liberalism. I've said it before, which is a liberalism based with the starting axioms of basically Plato and Aristotle and Rome, Athens, and Jerusalem. Thank you very much. That's perfectly fine version of liberalism. It just includes a hierarchy, a well-defined hierarchy. And as I said, most of the people apparently reading Plato's Republic have poor comprehension. Reading comprehension is 0. They're just making stuff up and contradicting what Plato says. And so what hope do you have if that's what's happening? You're teaching people the classics incorrectly and they're buying it because they didn't just read what was on the page and look at you and say you're full of bleep, which is what you should do when people do that. Then what hope do we have, right? But we need a way to engage with the fact that it takes humility to be a good leader, right? And that doesn't mean that everybody who kills somebody shouldn't be a leader. Actually, quite the opposite. I would say you need to cull the herd, guys. Like the herd needs to be culled, and the longer we wait, the more culling we got to do. So my theory is still like, let's cull now instead of later, because this isn't working out. And you can just kick people out of polite society, and that would be a good start, right? But eventually, like, there's people that just they have to be put away. They have to be put away, right? They have to be made unsuccessful in perpetuity, right? Their families have to be impoverished. And this has to be known publicly, and they have to be sent away. There's no other way to do this. Like, historically, this is and when you don't do that, you always get war. Always, without any historical exceptions. I'm sorry, but it's clear as day that you get out of this exactly one of 2 ways. In the meantime, you
Right.
grind through it and suffer, basically.
Right. Right. But here's the thing. Not to go back to him too much, but Jonathan Peugeot has a problem with putting people away, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
And this came out with very much like in the whole Shrek analysis that he did, that like
Mm.
that when you put the monsters away, then they come back, and so you shouldn't be putting them away. I think that's I don't think that's right. First of all, because
No,
monsters
it's wrong.
definitely should be put away, and you should put every bit of effort that you have into it, if you're at that appropriate level of the hierarchy. And the other thing is that I think it's a way of confusing cause and effect as well, because
Yep.
you're treating the the second order effect the same as the first order effect. So the first
Yep.
order effect would be that you're putting away the monsters, and the second order effect is that they come back.
Yeah.
So he's treating them both kind of as though they're equal,
They're flat.
or
Yeah.
even the second order is stronger than the first order effect.
Right. Right.
And I think that's a confusion of cause and effect. And I think he's not separating them
I agree.
at that point. When he's talking that way, he's not putting a distinction between them enough.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Well, he's doing the postmodern thing explicitly. So just look, man, I'm just gonna tell you, like, my life is weird. Never watched Shrek. I don't know why, and I knew not to watch it. I don't ask me how. I have no freaking idea. When Jonathan Majot described the opening scene of Shrek, I said, okay, this is a problem that was resolved with the movie War Games. Okay, at the very end of War Games, the computer itself, in other words, a purely logical device, figured out through simple first order logic, a strange game, the only way to win is not to play. So if you're watching a movie like Shrek and the opening scene happens, you shut it off. But Peugeot says, no, I'm going to tell you what the author really meant by this. It's like, now you're trapped in his world, right?
Mhm.
You got psyoped by yourself because you weren't paying attention to the fact that postmoderns are wrong about everything. They're lying to you. You can't do those things, right? They certainly couldn't. That's for sure, right? And you've engaged in the very thing that the postmoderns want you to engage in, which leads to skeptical cynicism. Rather than saying, oh, this is telling me that it is invalidating itself in its very nature. It is self-consuming or self-parasitic. I'm not going to engage with it. A strange game, the only way to win is not to play. This isn't that hard. Like, it's really, there's a bunch of stuff that falls into the third category. Do I accept it? Do I reject it? Or do I walk away and just go about my business? And
Yep.
maybe that's where the monsters come in. Maybe the monsters can watch Shrek and argue about it amongst themselves instead of arguing with us because we're engaging them because we watch Shrek. Because I think that's what happened on a larger scale, maybe. But I think that's the problem. When you buy into this postmodern garbage and all of it is evil and none of it is not evil. Really important. Don't try to redeem anything they said. There's no redemption there. And you're not the freaking redeemer anyway. What are you doing? Like, just stop trying to redeem things. That's not your job. I don't care who you are. Not your job. Right? You are not there to even offer redemption. That's still not your job. Much less try to do it yourself or do it on behalf of others. No, still not your job. Right? And people get caught up in this postmodern. They want to play the postmodern game. But it's not healthy. Plato told you you wouldn't comprehend. See, Pluto, I'm thinking of cartoons. The problem is people who don't use that same argument to those they disagree with. Yeah, I mean, they're not principled, right? That's what it means to be not principled. I'll use the argument on one side and not on the other. Well, then you're not principled. And that's fine. Most people are incapable of being principled. The question is, what are we going to do about them? Well, we need to put up boundaries and we need to mediate those boundaries. It's not. It sounds like he's treating putting away as making an imperial boundary. Yeah, exactly. Well, again, he sees all boundary and all difference as a bad thing. And that's because he can't resolve it with hierarchy, because none of these people want to have a discussion about hierarchy. Even with each other, they won't do it. I tried to talk about freaking cooperation with Benjamin Boyce, and he just kept shutting me down. And I'm like, I was getting a little frustrated. I'm like, bro, I just want to talk about cooperation for like 5 seconds here. And he just would have none of it. No, there's no cooperation in our camp. We're leftists. Fair enough. Like, fine. Fair enough. You're highly organized, uncooperative, because you can be organized and uncooperative because of mimicry, by the way. Another thing no one wants to talk about, but whatever. Manuel, unforced errors. Exactly. Don't call out the demons unless you can beat them. Yeah, I agree with that. Also, I can beat the demons. That ain't that hard. These are tiny demons, guys. We gotta up our demon game at some point. Young God, impermeable. That is unable to permit things through. Well, that's one way to say it. Yep. And it's that permeability in the boundaries that we need. That then to have permeability, you need mediation.
Yeah.
You
Well,
need
and there's different ways of like the kind of like permeation stuff. I mean, I think a really healthy, well, like maybe this is like a Western way of doing it. This is not how it happened in Seven Samurai. I think generally not. Is that there's like a way in which the hierarchy is inherited, or it's like the hierarchy is maintained, or like the distinction is maintained by the person up above, and the person below is always like reaching above. Like this is like people trying to join the higher leagues of a soccer game, and the people up above are always telling them, no, you need to get better, you need to get down and play more and play more football and get better at it, and then you can join us. Like when you get through the division boundary, or this is like the guy asking the pretty girl for a date, and she's like no. So like you're always reaching above, and the person above is telling you no. That's one way of doing it.
Well, and in sports in particular, the way they do divisions is that the Division 1 team wins 3 years in a row, and then they're like, "All right, you got to get out of here. we can't have the same team winning all the time. Like that's no good." And then they become the bottom end of the next division up, right? Like that's fine. Excuse me, but all boundaries are permeable, and just people are treating them like they're not because they're fundamentalists. Basically, they're literalists. They're just taking these things one way.
And even having something that you can see across the boundary is already uplifting and motivating and inspirational, but you need to keep it separate for it to exist, because if you're there and you're not at that level, you're going to ruin it for everyone.
That's right. You ruin it that's the key. You ruin it for everyone. And it's this asymmetry where a small number of people ruin it for everyone that science, because science is always based on this quote consensus nowadays, which is incorrect science, by the way, but whatever, we'll forgo that for the moment. The scientism is very much like, well, the most people determine the thing. And it's like, that's never happened ever historically. So I'm going to go with no, that didn't happen, because they're confused about cause and effect and they're materialists. So when you're confused about cause and effect and you're materialist, of course, you're just going to go with the big number. Big number do all work. Oh, it's not true. It's ridiculous, right?
Yep.
Like it wasn't until Elon Musk, tried to do, I forget what he was trying to do, but he wanted to do something very specific for NASA. And then NASA's like, well, that's great, but actually we can't use that. And Musk is like, what do you mean you can't use that? And they're like, no, here are our actual problems. And then he starts SpaceX because he's like, oh, these are the problems you need to solve. Well, actually, I know how to solve that. So he did. Good for him. Who knew steel rockets over carbon fiber? You should watch his talk on that. It's freaking unbelievable. It's like I learned so much. And then I learned how to connect things I already knew that should have been obvious to me, but right over my head. Oh yeah, carbon fiber is permeable. That's no good for rockets. Not pressurized fuel. Duh. Nope. I didn't even see it.
Yep.
Didn't even see it. Manuel post. There are different levels of permeability. Yeah, well, of course, but they need to be mediated. That's why they need to be mediated. You can have an estuary. I prefer you not. That's where baby sharks get born and stuff, and mothers protect their young. Where the rules of neither domain reign. Well, yeah, then you get eaten by the sharks pretty reliably. But certain risk interactions can happen. Yep. But there is salt and sweet water. Well, I don't know how sweet it is, but you end up with evil brine. I mean, those guys who made up that analogy just don't know what an estuary is, have never been one, don't know what the ocean is or how it works. Whereas I summered in Biddeford, Maine, where the Saco River empties into the bay of the ocean. I know quite a bit about this. Thank you very much. They're just wrong every time they speak about anything, actually. So, with a few notable exceptions, which I will tell you when they exist. But yeah, no, it's nuts. It's this. Well, if we just balance everything out, it'll all be equal. That's what they're doing, right? They're just, oh, we have a place where two things meet. It's like, oh, that's bad. Like that's just chaotic garbage nonsense. Which, to be fair to BOM, is exactly what happened to it the minute it lost its mediation. And once their mediator or administrator and originator left, the whole place, fell to immediate chaos within 4 months. It's total chaos, complete Protestant splitting, all the things you would expect in any mathematical model. All these people yammer on about models. I'm like, have you ever built one? Because I've built models for all this stuff on the computer, and the results are the same every time. They just contradict everything you speak about. Say, I don't.
Yep.
You're not even correct according to the math, and math is like your thing. Manuel, the Netherlands is effectively an estuary. Well, maybe. That's also what happens when you're a trading nation. Yeah. There's a mixing. Too much exposure to the outside. Yeah. Except, Manuel, the one thing you're missing there is that you're also highly organized. And that's what makes it work, which is why all the places that copied you, it didn't work at, right? Like the Netherlands is a massive outlier. It's like, why did this tiny nation full of basically swamp Germans, Manuel's term, not mine, by the way, he lives there. So I'm just gonna invoke swamp Germans. How the hell did they outclass pretty much everyone else? Right? Why? There's no reason for that. Well, it's because they're highly structured, right? It's because they're very good with setting things up and keeping them running, which most people are not, right? And some of that might be legacy. I don't know the history of the Netherlands all that well. But Portugal tried to copy it, Spain tried to copy it, France tried to copy it, England tried to copy it. They all failed. Right now, England created something different, to be fair. And that has now been completely dismantled. Thank you, Iran war. No, really, that's good stuff. Good stuff. And so the last vestiges of the old colonial system are now gone. Hopefully, the tyranny of being ruled by corporations, which is effectively what a parliament is gone. And there's a reason why that always has to be true. But it's only tangentially related. It's related to hierarchy directly. It's only tangentially related to permeability of boundaries. And that's the thing. Like, they were able, to Ixnan's excellent point, they were able to hold back the flood, right? And so they're good at managing floods. And so despite the fact that they had a flood of goods and a flood of trade, they were able to find a way to manage it through structure and to maintain those structures over time. Because everybody knows that everybody in the Netherlands has wooden shoes and puts their fingers in dikes when they spring leaks, because that's how I grew up. Manuel Post, fighting the water imposes certain constraints on how you can organize. That's correct. It's almost like we've identified by keeping out the flood. Yeah, no, absolutely, you did. And that's really important. I mean, a lot of the things I know about the world, I know because I used to do experiments when it rained and create big puddles in the parking lot that I get yelled at for occasionally, about water flow and water control. And then, of course, I'm also a sailor. And so you learn a lot about currents and how water works and what waves do and how they interact. And, all of that stuff is super important. And the Dutch learned all that, which is why they were able to do something that has not been at all duplicated. And you can say it's just a trade thing. It's not. The most sophisticated piece of equipment ever made in the world was made in the Netherlands, and it makes all your chips now. And you learn about this thing, and nothing about it seems realistic. There are zero components of that device that I think are real at this point. I'm like, no, there's no way you could flatten this out into a pancake with a drip. Like, this seems insane, but it works, right? And it works. And I have a computer because of it, right? Or related technologies, at least. I don't know what generation this laptop is. But like, is that a good thing though? Like, I don't know. It might be the Dutch that destroy the world and not the Germans, Manuel. It's worth keeping an eye out for. But that's not possible without mediation, right? The mediation of the water teaches you the mediation of the flood of trade, teaches you the mediation of things as such, right? It exapts out, to use some, Vervaeke language there.
Yep.
The mediation is what matters, right? The mediation is what matters, because things are permeable. We do not live in a world of hard boundaries. It's very expensive to maintain hard boundaries. Very expensive. That's why when rebellions win, that's why they win.
Yep. 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 I think, yeah, that's a really good point about the exaptation, because you can see the cause and effect there. You can see what is the first thing, like the thing that came first, and what's the thing that came second. And usually the thing that came first is not. You usually can't really reduce it to an idea or something like that. It's like people don't start by philosophically inventing some structure and then applying.
That's right.
It's usually some small issue that happens outside you that you have to fix, and then that it bubbles up and it exapts and it goes everywhere around the world and that kind of stuff. But it's important that you have the cause and effect, otherwise you can't see that, and you mess everything up.
Manuel's making an irrelevant distinction. We didn't destroy anything. We just enabled the destruction. It's so much better. Thanks. That's better. I wanna drag in a couple things from 2017 Maps of Meaning, episode 6, Story and Metastory, which is part 2 of this particular section, because there's a couple of interesting points that Peterson made that we went over this morning on the Mark of Wisdom Discord server, as we have been doing on Monday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Mark of Wisdom Discord server as part of our little practice here, our experimental practice. One of the things he actually talks about is that this is part of a warning, right? If you hear an economic description for the cause of why something happened, or if you hear a description that is political as the cause of why something happened, or if you hear a description that is psychological as the cause for why something would happen, here's something very interesting that Jordan Peterson said in this particular episode. The only optimistic thought that I've ever been able to derive from psychology, right, is just that the sense of meaning is an instinct and not an epiphenomena, right? In other words, it's an orienting reflex within the self-similar fractal reality. Now, I had to paraphrase that because he kind of says it in two parts in a disjointed way. But that's his only optimistic thought out of psychology. And part of that is because what they've deleted from psychology are the driving factors in psychology. Jung and Freud were very clear that all of the driving factors of psychology are a function of your unconscious or subconscious mind, depending upon which one of them was speaking. They had different terms for the same thing, because of course they did. And so when you hear a psychological, you can just know immediately it's not correct. There's no psychological cause to anything, right? Psychology talks about your reactions to things and why they happen. And the only valid application of psychology as a discipline, or really as anything, is if you're a practitioner who is trained and helping another person. In other words, you don't ever self-psychologize. People have said that for years, decades that I know of. Self-psychologization is invalid and turns you to evil for real. Don't do it. Yep. Don't try to do it. Yep. Don't think about doing it. And don't psychologize your friends either, because you're not a psychologist. It takes a lot of training and a certain.
You're just going to be doing all this empathization crap.
Yes, empathy is a psyop, and unless you're a mother with a child under the age of 5, is evil. So
you're just going to be projecting your little whatever problems on other people.
Well, you will project. I mean, the problem is people don't realize one of the waters you definitely swim in is called psychological projection. Right. And when there's a lack of things, most people will default to projecting into them. And that's why conspiracy theories work, right? Because you can say something silly like, well, the bullet should have exited the body and therefore it was ancient aliens, because you're projecting in the implications of the fact of a fact. But the fact of the matter is bullets of any caliber don't always exit the body. Like if it hits a bone, it ain't going nowhere. I don't even know what else to tell you. And you can say there's
Yep.
no bones in your neck, but of course there are. So like, I don't like, where would you go? Like where are you going with this, right? And so it's very difficult for people to sort of understand that psychological projection is a psyop that's being used against you by conspiracy theorists. That's what conspiracy theorists do. And that doesn't mean that they're wrong about everything, but the reason why they're right is not what they claim it is ever, right? And so the problem is that anything is inconsistent and imperfect and unideal by some measure, and in many aspects. And so you can break anything or quote deconstruct, which nobody can deconstruct anything. Anybody says deconstruct, run away from those people and never listen to them, and be polite, smile and nod, because you know there might be psychopaths, they might stab you or something. But like, don't listen to them. These are already crazy ways to talk. Nobody can deconstruct anything. That's nonsense. Constructing things is sufficiently difficult. The only thing you can do is fly a plane into a building. That's all you can do. And if you want to call that deconstruction, then you're a psychopath. It's not. You're just destroying things.
Yep.
It's a destruction. There's no deconstruction. It doesn't make any sense. It's
Yep.
it's an invalid way of manipulating the language, and therefore manipulating the person that's hearing it. And so the problem is that what ends up happening is people project into these things, and that's where the conspiracies actually come from. And I got to address not this comment, the next one. Manuel, if you are unable to walk by the light provided you, you have to be your own light. Yeah, well, that's true. Everything you lack will be hiding in your shadows. True. Young God, I watched the trial. I'm sorry, buddy, but also the prosecution kind of proved he was innocent in 3 different ways. So I'll have to tell you about that. But also, it was impossible for him to have done it. And it's very sad that people don't know that. But I watched the trial live when it was on. And they did the worst job ever of all time. The glove, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. That was brilliant. Also true. If the glove doesn't fit, then it's not his glove, dumbass. It's not that hard. What they're like, oh, it shrunk. I'm like, would it shrink like 8 sizes? Did you see how not fitting it was? Nothing shrinks that much. Nothing. Shrinky dinks don't shrink that much in an oven. You ain't fooling me with that nonsense. So yeah, no.
But even if it is ambiguous, I mean, it's worth having systems that people can rely on. You know, it's like if the
yeah. Well, but that's the thing. Everything's imperfect. Everything's imperfect.
Yeah.
Right. And so the question is, when you psychologically project, do you want to psychologically project nihilism or hope? Because that's really what we're talking about at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Or ambivalence. You could always just not project, like I do, or try to do as best I can. You can always not project, although that takes a lot of discipline. That's stoicism. Stoicism, the best way to think about stoicism is not the way people tell you. It's don't effing project, right? Because what happens is now you're able to see the world as imperfect as it is and go, oh, okay, it's just imperfect, right? Instead of being some retard academic that just caught up yesterday to the fact that the government lies or something, you know, completely benign. It's been going on since before they were born. It's just they didn't know about it. And so they think it's new and then they got to pay attention to it. And I'm like, yeah, we resolved all that 6 months ago on the internet. I don't know what you're doing on Twitter with it, but you know, it's over and over again. It's gotten louder and worse. And you know, I mean, Nolan's Odyssey is the greatest example. Like none of you people have ever couldn't even take 10 minutes out, ask the AI real quick, give me a description of all the, you know, or you give me a summary of all the descriptions of all of Nolan's movies. Oh, he writes mirrors. That's what the AI will tell you, right? You have to ask it the right questions. It takes about 10 minutes though. Yeah, it's a lot quicker to just tweet some nonsense out that you barfed out this morning. Or maybe that's the wrong side that it came out of, but whatever. You know, and then that's the problem. We're flooded with all this stuff. And in that case, it's the marginal so-called expertise that doesn't exact, right? So some idiot in academia talking about politics, I go away, just shut up and get lost. And like talk about what you have a PhD in or something instead. Maybe that would be more interesting and more accurate. But dude, they're just barfing all over the place, their latest thoughts. And I'm like, I'm not interested in your psychological projection. Can't you be stoic about this and say, I don't know anything about that. I'm just going to shut up. Hey, you think you know something about the Iran war? You have to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me. You'd have to be mentally retarded to think you actually understand any of that. I know I don't. There's a few things I see that other people don't, which is how I know they have no idea what they're talking about. But I'm not claiming to know that much about it. I know they're getting rid of the old vestiges of the colony. Iran and Iraq only exist because we were saving the British Petroleum Company at the end of the first act of the Great War. Most people don't know that. So those people shouldn't be talking about Iran at all. If you don't know that part of the history, you're done, kid. You need to go talk about never that. Something that isn't ever related to that, even adjacently, right? Like just never. But they can't help themselves, right? We're psychologically barfing our psychological projection all over the place. Ixnaan, if you think imperfections are problems, yes, then you will project solutions. Brilliant. This is why we love Ixnaan.
Yep. And
that's why we
one
need
of those
the mediation.
distinctions.
That's why we need the mediation of the boundaries. Sorry, Gustavs, but that's why we need it, because that phenomena is common.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And you know, just like people can't distinguish cause and effect, they also can't distinguish like the you know, like the normal case and the exception. That's just another one of those distinctions that, like, if you wanna, you can collapse them. Like, you shouldn't, and I'll fight you for it, but you shouldn't be collapsing. Like, I'll
Right.
also fight for the cause and effect, and also I'll fight for the king. Like,
Right. And the boundaries they don't know, the boundaries they don't understand are where they end and other things begin. In other words, well, I'm an expert in, Tolkien and Lewis. And so I'm qualified to talk about myth as such. And I'm like, are you? But let's figure out if you could read the allegory of the cave correctly first, okay? And then I will decide whether or not you even know what an allegory is, what a metaphor is, and what a myth is, because those are all related in an important way and have nothing to do with story, by the way, which is really important because there's a hierarchy there. Do you know where any kind of boundaries on anything are? Because they don't know where their own boundaries are. Beyond God, factories are temples of industry. Well, you can treat them that way, but then you'd be retarded, so don't do that. So meta. Well, but there's no such thing as meta. Meta is an evil word. I have a whole video about that. It's always religious war. No, there's no such thing as religious war. There's war, but there's no such thing as religious war. Manuel, boundaries are solutions to problems. In some cases, but I think they're also the things that prevent a bunch of. Let's prevent problems. I think the same leftist retards, because they're all retards. I don't know why, but everybody on the left seems to be retarded for some reason. I can't figure it out, at least about certain things. They seem to be fundamentally unable to avoid creating more problems, which I think is because they don't believe in boundaries. And if you bring boundaries down, there's a condition where the problems just multiply as a result of bringing down the boundaries or pretending they don't exist or whatever. And so that's a bigger problem. You're in until you're out. Well, yeah, they're trying to draw their own boundaries. They're trying to self-identify. That's trying to draw your own boundaries, right? And then we have forgiveness to deal with that. Well, I have fire. I want fire to deal with that. It's better. Beyond God, beyond the horizon lie monsters. Not beyond the horizon. Maybe there are horrors beyond the horizon you cannot imagine, right? And then, because now that I think about it, H.P. Lovecraft does a really good job with this. There's a veil. You don't even want to see the veil, much less pierce it. Every once in a while, the veil gets pierced and bad things happen. He's got the best. Like, if you wanted to talk in quote metaphysics, it's okay. Just read H.P. Lovecraft and then we'll chat. And until you've done that, you don't understand anything. Once you've done that, you at least have a hope in hell. of sort of almost grasping certain important aspects. We'll say when the when the binaries exist, and I think the monsters are supposed to be put in their place because they can orient towards the chaos and mediate it for the things that are not monsters. Like that's their proper role. Like that's what the margin is for. The margin is a buffer, right? So that the absolute chaos that H.P. Lovecraft writes about does not enter the world, right? And that so that when people who would be unprepared to travel in those spaces, because maybe some of the monsters can, they never get near it. Why? Because they're afraid of the monsters that are in between them and those spaces. Perfectly healthy, right? Just gradations of warning systems as a result of boundaries. Oh, you've passed this boundary. Oh, did you pass it with a test or did you pass it without one? Right. And that's part of the problem is that
Yeah, yeah.
we
The
don't have that
chaos
gate.
is infinite. The chaos is infinite, and you
Yeah.
can't be fighting active wars on all of your different fronts. Like you have to, you have to have mediation in between, and a lot of that is going to be little compromises, little peace deals. Just like keeping a dog there and like feeding it some scraps every now and then. Making sure things are kind of kept in like whatever, just like working for now. I mean, if you look at like America as the center of the world, you could argue that like maybe America should go to war with all the countries around it. Like there's problems everywhere,
Yeah.
everywhere,
Yeah.
on every front, every direction. There's problems, and most places are doing worse than America, actually,
Right.
unlike what people say. And there's
Right.
many solutions on each of those boundaries that are these kind of intermediate states that do keep the really crazy stuff away.
Yeah, I mean that's what's frustrated me about the conversation. Peterson's gotten really close with a couple of things. His Vice interview was excellent. I wish he had pursued that, right? Peugeot talks about the margin, but not in enough detail. They both talk about hierarchy, but they don't explain any of it or describe it in any reasonable fashion. People are throwing around story. Most of those people couldn't write their way out of a wet paper bag with assistance from the outside. No one really understands what myth is. No one has a good definition of that. Although Richard Rowland came pretty close at Symbolic World too. I still got to do a video about that. Maybe I'll do my version of that video at some point. I sort of dropped that on the floor because there's so much other things that are interrupting my existence. There's all these discussions that aren't being had that would be helpful, right? The discussions we are having are not helpful. Discussing, what is Western canon and is the Odyssey part of it? And oh, by the way, it has none of our morals and ethics. That might be important to realize. What does that mean? These are not helpful. Like you're actually not going to change anything in the world, even if you're right, or even if you learn something, or even if somebody else learned something from your correct interpretation. That's not moving the needle, right? It's more thinky talky. And you need practices to move the needle. You need people getting together to move the needle. And in order to get people together, you need mediation and you need hierarchy. Like you need those things. And it would be nice to talk about, well, what is the margin? What is the proper place for the margin? How do we deal with the margin when it gets out of control? All those things would be nice to know because the leftists seem clueless and they did nothing. And now they're just whining that the left left me. It's like, it's a self-indictment. Like, wake up. You've indicted yourself. No, they right over their heads every time. It's like you've just indicted yourself and you don't even realize what you've said or what the implications are. And that's horrible. Like we need to make, real meaningful change in the world. And you can't even see what the results of what you've admitted to here. And it's a real problem. It's a serious deficit.
Yeah, well,
And
people used to have pretty like shorthand ideas of what the effects would be of the causes, right? Like
yeah.
people used to people used to know what would happen if you like if you cheated on your wife, then there's certain things that would happen, or if you work hard, certain things will happen. Yeah, maybe it'll get boring, but you at least are aware of it, and certain other things might blossom out of it. You know, like people used to have these shorthands, but nowadays people have given up on those. Like anything can happen. I mean, if you're nice to your child, then they might turn out to be a brat, or they might turn out to be, you know, actually very nice and kind. Like people can't distinguish these. Like just don't have any idea. It's all about like, oh, if you make your kid go to church, then he'll end up hating church. Or if you go to church, he'll end up just keeping going to church. Like there's like complete disconnection.
Right. 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 And there's a thing. I think the problem is people are confused by you should do this no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. With you should do this because there's an effect that will happen because that's a cause. It's like that's not how the world is. It's not a video game, right? It's not
Yeah.
a I do this, I get that. That's not how the
Yeah.
world is.
Yeah.
And they're treating everything in the world like that. And it's like
Right.
that's not how it is. Like there's a lot of stuff you just like you eat and about the only result is you excrete. Like that's like, but you need to do that so that you can do all the other things. Like and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
obvious, and
Yeah.
people are not. They're just classifying everything as a cause and effect. That's how you get conspiracy theories, right? Well, this thing happened. It must have had a cause. And because individualism, I must be able to understand that cause. And so it's got to be lizard people because I've ruled out all the things that I know about a material reality. And fair enough. That probably happens for you very quickly because you don't know a lot about material reality. The number of people, very bright people, ostensibly who did not understand. No. Elon Musk and the guys at Anthropic were fighting to be the first $1 trillion valued stock exchange company, publicly traded company. Period. They were. This is the public battle that had you been paying attention to that part of the world, which I was at the time, at least tangentially, you would have noticed in the same way that Bezos and Musk were competing to be the first ones into space. That was all. These are hobbies for rich people. You should ignore them. You're not a rich people. You're not going to be able to play that game ever. And that's okay. Why don't you focus on something you can play? Don't try to change the world. Just try to change yourself, right? Because that's easier. And on this channel, we're really big on this concept, which is, if because you're part of the world, if you want the world to be better, like you just have to be better, and the world needs you to be better. So be better because the world needs you. And the only thing you have to do for that is for you to be better. You don't have to solve the problem of education or work out, what's really happening with the war in Iran, or figure out how much of the bad behavior is just the Jews, because it ain't zero. It just ain't 100%. Like, I don't know what percentage it is. Bad actors come in all forms. I don't know of any ethnicities with only good actors in it. Do you? I'm just saying. Like, or any religions for that matter, because they do the ethno-religious trick all the time. We're really struggling with identity because we don't mediate boundaries, and because
Yep.
we don't accept mediation for boundaries. I can't just get out there and say, yeah, right. We've got this no true Scotsman fallacy problem,
Yep.
which means we don't have the authority to say, no, this is American and this is not American. No, this is European and this is not European. And I think it's worth calling out. So I said at the time, and this I'm almost certain I said it on the video on the live stream on Saturday during the practice. Like the reason why I did not see this mediation of the boundaries in Seven Samurai in the way that Gustavs did is because Gustavs lives in Europe and I live in the United States. And we do not, in the United States, exactly zero people in the United States understand hierarchy, even a little bit, unless they came from Europe recently. Like they just don't, because we didn't grow up with a proper hierarchy and we never discuss it here. Now, there is a quiet hierarchy. There's the Boston Brahmin and all that nonsense. And I grew up with all that, so I understand it better than most Americans. But my goodness, down south, like there's all these implicit hierarchies There's nothing explicit about hierarchy. And so
Yep.
until you put it in that frame, because you saw it that way, I did not have that frame at all. At all.
Mm,
It was a real eye opener for me. And
mm.
I really super appreciate that you brought it up in that way.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. You know, there's a part of what you said, not just now, but before, when you were saying that, you know, Bezos and Musk are competing to get the first company or the first rocket in space, whatever. And that we shouldn't be, you know, putting our attention towards that. Like, and we should stay in our lane, more or less. Like
Yeah.
we should figure out our lane and stay in it. That's a consequence. Like that attitude, even though it works, it's a consequence of other people not putting us in our lane. Because
That's right.
that's what used to happen. People used to be
That's right.
put in their lane, and you didn't even have to worry about what your lane was because it got imposed onto you. And you know, we've been failed by society. We killed the king, or someone killed them. Like someone killed our king. I don't know, whatever. Like one of those, but in many different places have different situations. But pretty much nobody has a king except for like Saudi Arabia, maybe. You know, like
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. And actually, even though maybe that king isn't the greatest guy, like the Saudis seem to be in some ways doing pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so in this day and age, when we don't have that, when we do have to take care of ourselves, like we should be taking care of ourselves, and part of that is staying in our lane.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Oops, Manuel. The religion of safety insulates you from consequences and therefore reality. Yeah, well, if you believe you do not have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent. And the safety religion is a big fashion right now. Religion is fashion.
Yep.
Or as Monsignor Shea says, the religion of the day. Excellent book, by the way. St. Mary Press. His name's not on it, but it's him. Young God, sometimes you get fat. Yeah, well, that happens. Ixnon, also the competition between Musk and Bezos is a type of cooperation. Yeah, of course it is. I mean, they're both aiming for higher, right? Or at least they were. I don't know what they're aiming for nowadays. Manuel, we still have the lane attitude here. The lanes got deconstructed, right? That's a toxic mix. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's always who determines your lane, and it's like it doesn't really matter. It can't be you. So if you try to determine it yourself, you ruin the world. So don't do that, right? And so you know, because and then everybody appeals to the outlier. Well, so it's not perfect. And it's like, thanks, genius. I don't know where these people learned about the world. I'm like, I was always told the world's not perfect and it ain't gonna be. That's what I was told. Like in the listen carefully to what I said. Rewind. Right? Yeah, it ain't perfect. That's correct. It is not going to become perfect. Also true. Right? And there's a reason for that. And that's important, right? Because it gives us something to do, which is to cultivate the world and make it better, which is to mediate the boundaries. One boundary you mediate. Stoicism, in a very deep sense, is about mediating your own boundaries, the boundary between you and the outside world, right? Should this affect me? Do I have any control over it? No, I let it wash over me. What do you think that is? That's boundary mediation, baby. That's what it is, right? You're mediating the margin between you and the outside world. It's just a specific way of doing that. It's very good. I'm a Roman Stoic for sure. I've been most of my life. I'm disgusted by what people call Stoicism nowadays. I think they should all be drawn and quartered. I would like to volunteer to do that to them, by the way, because I hate it. I hate it when people corrupt good things. And they are doing that. You know, maybe not all of them, but also almost all of them, almost certainly. All the ones I've seen anyway, they're all, you know, stoicism is, you know, not feeling your feelings or some nonsense garbage frame, right? It's because they don't mediate. I don't want to mediate. It's like, no. Stoicism is mediating your boundaries. What do I have control over? And therefore, what should I be upset about and not upset about? You can't get upset about things you don't have control over because it doesn't do you any good, but it does waste your time, energy, and attention on something that you can never affect. And that just has ripple effects.
Yep.
What else? You running out of steam here? You wanna wrap it up? Or?
I'm out of steam.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What do you have for conclusions and suggestions and all that nonsense? And then I'll close this out.
Yeah, my pretty brief conclusion would be that what to take away from this is that we should try to figure out like who is above us in the hierarchy, and because that's the place, as I mentioned, where we will be getting our food from, like our daily bread, like who feeds us, who clothes us, who gives us the patterns of life to even get through the day, uh, you know, who are we dependent on, and all this stuff, and we should really be looking for like the virtue, because that's going to be like the biggest deal, is who's showing us the virtue, who is transmitting the virtue to us in the world, because virtue and these good spiritual qualities like humility and temperance and fortitude, like the the power, virtue just means power, it means strength. Like,
Mm,
where's that strength coming
mhm,
from? It's coming
mhm.
from, you know perfection to imperfection, from the center to the margins, right? And
Right.
the center is more perfect and the margins are less perfect. They have more idiosyncrasy and more issues with them, more small problems. And I think the great thing is that one of the great wonders of the world is that the most perfect thing in the world, which is God, has actually come into the world and is available to us.
Mm.
And you can go there and immediately, directly spend time with God in any Catholic church. Just go inside and just look at Him, and you will grow in virtue, and all of those good things will be given to you for free. That's all.
Wow, that's a great powerful ending there. Yeah, I mean, I think and thank you everybody for watching. This is wonderful, and thank you so much, Gustavs, for taking the time, because I really appreciate it when I can talk these things through with other people, because so much better than when I'm doing my scripts on my own. Um, Look, guys, everything I have said has been completely on topic. I can understand why you might not think so. I get that. Also, I completely assure you, as somebody who's been doing this sort of thing for years, like this polemic and debate since I was 17, okay, with people with ridiculous IQs that I could tell you about, but you wouldn't even believe the numbers, right? And many of them, right? I am good at this. I'm telling you, everything I said is bang on topic, right? Because a lot of the world is just related in a certain specific way. And mediation of the margin is probably the best single thing that we need to focus on right now. When I said Jordan Peterson talked about this in the Vice interview, go listen to the Vice interview when he talks about the makeup and the lingerie. That's mediation of a margin, mediation of a boundary. That's how you do it. And we keep avoiding that conversation. We keep avoiding the conversation of cooperation, because cooperation requires two boundaries, one above you and one below you, or basically a circular boundary around you, right? Who's the people who are cooperating and these are people that aren't cooperating. Fair enough. But no one's willing to have these conversations. It's very mysterious, right? Unless of course you believe in demons, which it's always demons, by the way. Then it makes total sense. Like, and this is why this is a frustrating, sort of difficult thing to grasp, and why I'm frustrated with people who, making binary statements about these things. I think these things are worthy longer form conversations, right? They're important to understand this idea of knowing where you fit and knowing what you're good at and what you're not. Maybe you're really good at talking to students, and maybe that translates to the camera well enough that you can publish your lectures. Ryan Reeves certainly can do it. Jordan Peterson certainly can do it. We could make an argument for John Vervaeke, although I think he's that does the worst job of the three of those. There are other people for sure. Most people can't do that, right? So should they get into politics because they're good at that? No, probably not. Because the odds they're going to be good at politics are basically low. They're not zero, but also, right? And this is the problem when we don't have this sense, when we're not mediating the margin, we're not mediating the boundaries, when we're not mediating ourselves, our own boundaries, right? Then we run into trouble. And the trouble that we run into is not just, we'll say, the problem of self-identification or identification as such, which I will eventually do a video on. In fact, I realized My live streams are running into that. So that's going to be a big deal. We're going to do like a 6-week run, I think, by the way. I might have to double up the pirate live streams. I realized that this morning, right? But when you struggle with that, there's no space for the grace to enter you. There's no space for you to be humble. There's no space for you to learn and grow. That space doesn't exist, right? Because in essence, you have too much space and you can spread out and join the flood, right? But without the boundaries and without the mediation, you don't have good exemplification of perfection, right? Of the perfect person, for example, as Gustavs alluded to, right? That's a real problem. And we need to be able to submit to that, right? To the fact that there is an ideal out there, right? The ideal marriage doesn't involve divorce, right? And then that's not going to be perfect, right? But maybe it's the church's job to hold up the ideals, which is doing a poor job of, I would argue, different live stream. If you want to get eviscerated over that, let me know. Gladly do it as politely as I can possibly manage. This mediation is important, and nobody wants to mediate because that's just seen as mean or tyrannical, and that's just not true. We need that. We need it to survive. And that's why we have to end the live stream, because we're out of steam and our mediation on this topic is over. Thank you everybody for your time, energy, and attention, right? Your tea, I appreciate it. And I'm doing a live stream this Friday. I have to double check on which topic, because now I have, like I said, I just figured out, oh no, we're careening into something important on the Friday live stream. So go back to authority, and which is only was that 3 weeks ago now, and just start there. The authority monologue is supposed to be one of my best, so hopefully they didn't lie to me about that. So yeah, this is going to be a trip. And Gustavs, thank you again for your time. I hope you have a wonderful sleep, and I hope that Manuel gets to jump back on the Discord server, because we haven't seen him in a while and we miss him. So thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon. If you want to see a topic, comment down below, like, subscribe, all that craziness. My entire channel talks about all this stuff all the time. So 5 years plus, let's keep it going. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you soon.